Hey Guru Nation, how's it going? Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, share. Really, it does help me out a lot. I know I say it all the time. It really helps with the algorithm. It helps me continue to push out this content. I'm never going to stop. I'm not going anywhere. I like this stuff too much. And, I got all these projects in my head, big projects I'm planning on working on pretty soon. My research site, brand new research site in Yuma, is turning 1 year old and starting to get employees. It's starting to get some structure, so it will free up my time, hopefully in the next few months, to not only manage that but manage other things. So anyways, look, today we had a screening at my site, Yuma Clinical Trials, and it got me thinking, you know what, I'm going to do a definitive guide to a screening visit. So I haven't prepared, haven't taken any notes. It's just from experience. Today, last week, I've been getting my hands dirty. One of the best things about doing this startup research site is just getting my hands dirty again with clinical research stuff, like being in the trenches. I know I just hired 2 coordinators, but I'm the lead CRC, and screening visits are so important, and it really starts a true screening visit starts at pre-screening. You want to make sure to have a successful screening visit. You want to make sure you've done a decent job at pre-screening. So it's not enough to have a lead. Somebody that's interested is not enough. You need somebody that's interested who also, on paper at least, looks like they qualify for the study. So if you can get their medical records, One of the benefits of working at a site, like being embedded within a doctor's office, is I get the referrals from the providers, and then I just look at the medical records, and we can kind of do a decent job pre-screening. You can never check all the boxes, but that's the first thing. To set up a successful screening visit, you got to do good at pre-screening. The next thing you got to do in order to ensure a successful screening visit is to prepare all the documentation necessary for the day of. So what does that mean? One of the things we do at my site, because we have new staff and I'm training them, is we prepare the day before a visit. So whether it's doing a mock visit on each other, and I'm not talking about drawing each other's blood and doing ECGs, but walking through the steps. Like, patient comes in, sit them down, do the informed consent, just go through a mock visit where you're going through everything. IRT, you're going through the electronic patient reported outcomes if need be, IWRS, which is now IRT, getting the informed consent. So like I said, a lot of the problems with screening visits occur when sites are not prepared, and when the patient's there day of screening, instead of spending time with the patient, the site's running around scrambling trying to find documents. Where's the consent form? Where's the latest version of the consent form? As somebody who's currently doing this stuff, guys, let me tell you, guys and gals, these IRB portals are not easy to use. So the last thing you want is the day of, like the morning when the patient's there and they're already nervous and they're already in an unfamiliar situation. You look unprofessional going through trying to find paperwork, ICFs, and all those kind of things. So I would say get all the documentation prepared ahead of time. The patient surveys is another thing. A lot of times there's electronic patient reported outcomes, and there's also paper patient reported outcomes. So just know what you have to do on screening visit. I know it sounds so obvious, but go through it. Actually put pen to paper. One of my favorite things about Katie, our new hire, is she's got these crazy cheat sheets for every visit, for every study that we have, and they're a work in progress, because as she learns something new, as we learn something new about a particular visit, she modifies it. She's amazing. I'm going to try to get her on video to share one of these soon, but we're still refining it. So let's get through the day of. Okay, the day of, what should really happen is before the patient shows up that morning or that afternoon, maybe an hour before they're scheduled to come in, somebody text them or call them and let them know how they can get a hold of you when they get there. I know it sounds simple, but at some of these bigger places, it's intimidating. The patient could get lost. At one of my PI's offices, the PI wants to do research an hour before the actual office opens, so the doors are actually closed, and the patient has to text you. And we actually had a patient today. We did not do this. We did not let them know to text us when they got there, and they assumed we were closed, and they left pretty angry, and I had to smooth things over with them. So yeah, make sure you do that. Have them text them and let them know, hey, when you get here, let one of us know. And that you can throw in any other special instructions there as well, like parking, whatever, all that kind of stuff. Once they're in, don't let them wait long in the waiting room. As soon as they get in there, go get them. Even if you have to bring them to another room and have them wait there, I'd rather they wait in that other room with the informed consent form, so that they at least can have time to read the informed consent form before somebody gets to them to do the informed consent form with them. I'm going to go through a brief process of informed consent with you for the screening visit right now, but basically, don't let the patient wait in the waiting room. If possible, have them come in, wait somewhere else. I have them wait in my office with me, and if I'm busy doing something else, I tell them, hey, can I get you, if I know they don't have to be fasting, can I get you some coffee, some water, something to eat, a snack? I always offer them. Most of the time they say no, but if they do say yes, go get them something or have somebody go get them a coffee. Most offices have coffee machines or whatever you can get for the patient, right? It doesn't have to be anything crazy. Just you want them comfortable. Now you're going to do the process of consent. You're going to bring the informed consent. Make sure it's the latest approved informed consent form. This is why you got to be digging through the IRB portal before the patient gets there, not while they're there. So make sure you have the most recent version of the informed consent. Make sure if it's not part of the ICF, make sure you get the authorization to release medical records signed day of by the patient. If you're in a state where an additional Bill of Rights is needed, like California, make sure you have that too. Although sometimes those are embedded in the ICFs, that's not always the case. All right. Process of consent. Private room with the patient, preferably a clinician, preferably the PI or the sub-I, joins at some point. Coordinator usually is there. That's at least my process of consent. Plenty of time to ask questions. Site, make sure patient demonstrates sufficient understanding of the informed consent. All risks, benefits, potential side effects of the drug are discussed. All study visits are broken down as to what's expected of the patient. Payments, adverse events, the fact that they can withdraw at any time, the fact that the informed consent form is not a contract. A lot of patients get intimidated. They see this informed consent form that's like 22 pages, and they're like, hey, they might feel like it's a contract. This is not a contract. I always tell them, this may look intimidating. This is not a contract. Matter of fact, this is our contract for us to make sure that we're treating you good as far as good clinical practice is concerned. This is not a contract. This is not a promise on your behalf. This is not anything that you're committing to. You're just acknowledging that you've been given informed consent. So that's informed consent. That's basically a process of consent. You want to document this process of consent. You want to make sure that this is documented, whether it's a checklist that you've gone through all these things I just mentioned, or whether you actually just document it as far as a narrative is concerned. You want to do that. That's a process of consent. That's the first thing that needs to be done at the screening visit. After that's done, then you want to look at the protocol. Is there a certain order of the assessments? Sometimes protocols have assessments that need to be done in certain orders. If you're not sure, ask your monitor. They should be able to tell you, and they should tell you this at the site initiation visit. If you're given freedom to do the assessments in whatever order you want, then use common sense. If the patient's fasting, you might want to get the blood draw out of the way. Or if the patient's on a special diet, like in one of my studies, we have a lactulose breath test, we might want to get that out of the way so the patient can relax and have something to eat or have something to drink. So that's the way I do my assessments when I'm not required by sponsor or protocol to have an order of assessments. I usually do it in that order. Typically, vital signs done before blood draw, but again, if they're fasting and they're really anxious, some of my patients are really anxious about blood draw. Like, it's actually a very common thing to be anxious about blood draw. So I always ask them, do you want to get this done out of the way first? They usually say yes. EKG, make sure you're doing that. Make sure you're following the ECG guidelines. Make sure when you draw the labs, back to the labs, make sure when you draw the labs that you're following the lab manual. The lab manual, you might be tempted to want to ignore it. That's fine. But do it at your own peril, because every lab, every study has a different process of drawing and packaging and shipping the labs. So make sure, like whether it's something as simple as labeling tubes, or whether it's something as simple as setting up the acquisition form or requisition form, there are always some variables. So make sure you know what you're doing when it comes to that. EKG, same thing. Are you using a central reader? Is it a printout of the ECG? Make sure the PI is signing it immediately, or a clinician signing it immediately, meaning day of, that they're giving their assessment of CS or NCS. If you need to collect urine and do an in-house urine drug screen, do that. Some sites do that first, immediately after informed consent. And then the variables come in. So most of these things, all of these things I mentioned, for the most part, are done at every screening. But now is where the studies differ based on particular protocols. So you might have electronic patient-reported outcomes, especially if it's a pain study. Pain, the patients have to rate a certain level of pain before you can move on. Other times it's like respiratory studies. You have pulmonary function tests, or whatever the indication is. They usually have certain assessments that are the gold standard for those assessments. You usually have to do those. A very important thing to do is ConMeds. Record ConMeds and record medical history. Don't just rely on what's on the medical records if you have them. Ask the patient, are you taking anything else in addition to this, and this that I see from your records here? And do you have any other medical condition besides this, or this? Document those things. Why? Because inclusion-exclusion criteria, which we're going to get to in a little bit. But before we get to inclusion-exclusion criteria, make sure you document all the ConMeds, all the medical history. One final thing for female subjects of childbearing potential, you really have to make sure that you explain to them, I know most consent forms do, but you really have to make sure that you explain to them the importance of not getting pregnant while in a study and what the acceptable methods for contraception are for that particular study, and document it. Make sure that's there. All right, now you collect medical history, ConMeds. Now you go through with a clinician or the coordinator or whomever is knowledgeable to do this. You go through line by line. Do this, okay? Each medication, line by line, has to have, each medication, each ConMed the patient is taking has to have an indication for it. So why are they taking it? If it's not in their records, ask them. Document it. Try to get dates, start dates, stop dates, or if it's still ongoing. Now, do this. Line by line, each medication and each indication, or everything a part of their medical history. Go through each one individually and compare it to every single inclusion and exclusion criteria. And as far as medications are concerned, read the fine print. Prohibited meds, meds that require a washout period. You have to know this stuff at screening. You have to document this. You have to do it. Not only is it for data integrity, but it's for patient safety. Absolutely have to go through every single inclusion-exclusion criteria for each medication and each medical condition that the patient has, and you got to go through prohibited meds and follow the washout period. And if you have any questions, get documentation as far as an email from the medical monitor that you're on the right track. Do all of this. A good coordinator is going to do all of this stuff. All right. If there's anything else you got to give the patient, sometimes, some studies require a stool sample from the patient that they can take home. Other times they require various assessments that the patients can take home or do on site. Try to do everything you can at the screening visit, because a lot of these windows to randomize are short. Ship the labs. Make sure you know what your FedEx cutoff time is or UPS cutoff time is, so that you don't have to redraw the labs. Make sure you centrifuge them properly. In about 2 to 3 business days, you should get the lab results back. You should already have the ECG results back. Now, get the PI to sign the lab results, clinically significant, non-clinically significant. Check one by one with the inclusion-exclusion criteria for all the lab results. If there's anything abnormal or clinically significant, have the clinician look at it and discuss with the medical monitor if need be. That's a screening visit. The screening visit can be broken up into 2 or 3 depending on the patient's time that they have available for the visit. Most patients don't know the visits take as long as they do. They're all surprised, but there's no way around it. Good documentation, good research requires time. The balance is you want to document everything properly and not miss anything, but also be mindful of the patient's time. Patients volunteering their time. They're a human being. They have other things to do, other places to be. They shouldn't be waiting around for you or your staff to figure out what's next. So that's that. Let the patient go as soon as they can, as soon as you're able to. Give them their stipend, whatever it may be. Offer them snacks if they need food, lunch, water, drinks, whatever. Also, give them a copy of the informed consent. Now the patients can leave. What you got to do is make sure that the PI writes a progress note or a clinician writes a progress note. Sometime during this period, usually right after informed consent, I should have put this there, you want to officially screen the patient in the IRT or in the IWRS, whatever it's called. It's a system, it's a portal. You log in, you officially screen the patient in the actual IRT system. So I want to get that out of the way. But you could do that when the patient leaves too. Just don't forget to do it the same day. Right? Now, follow protocol. If you're in doubt, ask your monitor. I'm not a monitor. I am a monitor, but I'm not a monitor right now on YouTube. Every study has their own requirements. You need to ask your own CRA about how those things work. Finally, after the PI progress notes, we discussed the process of consent. We discussed the labs. We discussed the ECG. There's a screening and enrollment log. You want to make sure that you fill that out. There's also an informed consent log in the regulatory binder. You want to make sure you fill that out. Don't fall behind on those things. There's also usually a master subject identification log. You want to fill that out. If you need more additional medical history from the patient, you should have the authorization to release records. You want to email or fax it to their provider so that they can be able to get it to you in a timely manner. That, as far as I know, is a screening visit in a nutshell, in under 20 minutes that research sites should follow. Of course, they're much more complicated than this. Screening visits usually take 2 to 4 hours, but this is YouTube, trying to keep it short. Like, subscribe, comment, share. I really appreciate it, guys. Take care.